I am utterly disgusted by the results of this election. Beyond my ability to describe, I am so disgusted. I'm sick to my stomach over this. I cannot believe that this country is this screwed up. Now, I've known for a while. I've talked about it here many times about how close we are to a tipping point of corruption and stupidity among the American people. And I said that, this election is going to tell us whether we have reached that tipping point or not. I didn't believe that we were quite there yet. Boy, was I wrong. Not only were we there, but we were way past it. This election wasn't even close. Donald Trump won the freaking popular vote. He lost the popular vote by 7 million votes just 4 years ago. Then he incited a violent insurrection against the country to overthrow the government in a coup attempt to stay in office illegally. He's indicted 4 times. You know all this stuff. All this stuff happened since 2020 when he lost the popular vote by 7 million votes. And he has gained among the American people all this support. I knew it was going to be close. I didn't think it was going to be like this. I thought Kamala Harris was going to win. I really did. Unbelievable. But here's what I want to do in this video. I want to talk about what went wrong, because I have some thoughts about that. I've had some thoughts about this for a while. I think there were some huge mistakes from the beginning. I mentioned some of them, but I didn't want to dwell on it because we were in the middle of this election that we needed to win, and there was nothing we could do about those mistakes at that point. But I think now that we have lost probably what was the most important election in American history, we need to come to grips with what happened here. Now, we are in a very dark place now, and things are going to get bad. But we can't just give up. What else are we going to do? Right? Where are we going to go? We have to stay in this fight. It's not a foregone conclusion that we're going to lose the Constitution, that we're going to become, some sort of fascist dictatorship. It certainly could happen, but we have to fight against it, and it's not over. A new chapter of this fight has begun. Now, it could have been a lot easier. We had a much easier way out of all of this. We could have just voted against this man yesterday, but apparently, just so sick over this. There's so much we're going to need to be talking about over the coming days and weeks. But let's begin here. I want to talk about some of the things that went wrong. Now, if you disagree with me on any of these things, that's fine. Please take the time to explain in the comments how you disagree with me. I will say this, though. I have no patience for people who are not serious. And by that, what I mean is, if I say something you disagree with, if you're one of those people who gets angry about it, you take it personally for some reason, and then you go and you leave nasty comments, I have zero patience for you. And if you do that on this channel, I'm just blocking you. I don't need people like that in this audience. I want serious people in this audience. People who can, disagree with each other and do so civilly. Maybe you can change my mind about something here. I'm certainly open to that. That's just a little bit of fair warning, and to tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from with this channel. I have no interest in having those kind of people in my audience. So if you disagree with me, that is fine. And I hope you take the time to explain your disagreement. Maybe I'm wrong, but here's what I see. And this isn't everything. These are sort of the broad strokes. Now, I will say this. I think Kamala Harris did an outstanding job. She coming in late and all of the challenges that she had as a result of that, I think she did an amazing job. She destroyed him in that debate. Her campaign was really fantastic. Are there things she could have done differently? Are there things that I think she could have done differently? Yeah, sure. But so what? She did great. I don't think this is not on Kamala Harris. This is on the American people. The problem here is the American people. And we now know a majority of the American people. We were worried about, Trump losing the popular vote, but being able to win narrowly in the Electoral College. He won the popular vote easy. This is a problem of the American people. That's the freaking problem here. At the end of the day, that's what we have to reckon with. Donald Trump isn't even the problem. Donald Trump wouldn't be a problem but for the majority of the American people who voted for him. They're the problem. And as I say, Kamala Harris did a great job. But here's the thing. I think this election was lost, if I'm being honest with you, and that's what I always strive to do, I think this election was lost 2 years ago. And let me explain. Actually, it really started to be lost 4 years ago. So there's several things I want to go through here. Please hear me out on all of this. First off, the two major issues driving Trump's victory, according to exit polls and all that, was the economy and immigration. Now, as to immigration, Joe Biden came in, and one of the first things he did was to issue an executive order undoing the border security measures that Trump had put into place. Now, I don't agree with everything that Trump did, but much of what was undone opened the floodgates. And you are lying to yourself if you think that didn't hurt us. It hurt us tremendously. If Biden had just kept most of those policies in place and limited the illegal immigration coming through our southern border, that would have, helped. Would that have won the election? No. But it certainly would have helped. It certainly gave Donald Trump a huge issue. And for nearly 4 years, it was a huge problem. Once Biden did that, the number of illegal crossings and all of that went through the roof. Then they tried to pass that bipartisan border security bill that Trump killed. When that didn't pass, Joe Biden issued his own executive order strengthening the border, essentially reverting to what Donald Trump had done. And almost overnight, illegal crossings went down dramatically. The border was much more secure. In fact, illegal crossings right now are at the lowest point since September of 2020, when Donald Trump was still in office. That's under Biden's new executive order. If he had just done that from the get-go, either left Trump's policies in place or replaced them with the policies that, the executive order that Biden had just a few months ago put into effect, if he had done that on day one, immigration wouldn't be nearly the powerful issue that it was in favor of Donald Trump. That was a huge mistake. That was the beginning of this loss that we suffered yesterday, this horrible loss for the country. That's where it began, in part. Here's something else. The economy. I've talked about this a lot. The president, let me put it this way. The job of the president, it's not just the policies and the executing the duties of the president. In that regard, I think Joe Biden did a really good job. I was pleasantly surprised by how good a job he did. With some of his big legislative accomplishments, his foreign policy, standing by Ukraine, all of this. He did so much good. But just doing the duties of the president and doing them well is not enough to be a successful president and to make your case to the American people. You need to communicate. Communication is a huge part of the job. It is a huge part of leadership. And the president, more than anyone else in our system, has the ability to command the attention of the American people. He has the bully pulpit, as Teddy Roosevelt referred to it. A powerful tool at the president's disposal that Joe Biden largely didn't use at all. And that was a huge mistake and a huge problem. Think of it this way. Let's take the economy. The American people think that the economy is awful. That's what they tell pollsters in poll after poll. That was one of their, the main issue yesterday, according to exit polls, was the economy and people thinking the economy is horrible. This despite the fact that our economy is the strongest in the world by far. We have historically low unemployment, like 4.2%. The stock market is booming. People's retirement accounts are booming. Inflation is finally beginning to come down. Interest rates are coming down. The economy is moving in the right direction, and it's strong right now. But the American people don't think it is. And there certainly are problems in the economy, for sure. Prices are too high, and that is the number one issue for people, is inflation, prices. And those, that is still too high, and it's a problem. What has Joe Biden done to educate the American people on why the economy is in the shape that it's in, that it's getting better, that we have work to do? Contrast Joe Biden with Donald Trump. Say what you will about Donald Trump, the man knows how to sell himself. That's all he did as president, constantly telling us how everything was great on his watch. What a great job he was doing. Everything. The economy was the best ever. Day in and day out. Over and over and over, he was selling to the American people. Joe Biden did virtually none of that. Democrats did virtually none of that. I've said many times that the American people, I believe, and I don't even think it's arguable anymore. The American people, by and large, are a bunch of blithering, freaking idiots. They don't know how anything works. Anytime you see a survey, when they ask questions like this, most Americans can't even name the 3 branches of government. Do you think they understand how the economy works or who controls prices? Of course not. They see prices too high at the supermarket and they blame the president. Why? Because they're idiots. Apparently they think the president controls the price of milk. What did Joe Biden, what did the Democrats do to educate them about why prices are high and what they're doing to combat inflation? Nothing. Why? Is it because Joe Biden was completely unable to do it in an effective way because he was too old? Or did he just assume that the American people were smart and they'd figure it out on their own? I've said over and over again, to assume that the American people are smart and will figure things out on their own is the biggest mistake you could possibly make in politics. The safest and most responsible thing to do if you're a politician is to assume that the American people are morons and explain everything to them as if they are morons, because most of them are. They're not going to get it on their own. You have to explain it to them over and over and over. You can't mention something once. I don't know how many times I've talked about this here on this channel. And I'd say, why aren't they talking about so-and-so? Oh, he mentioned it one time. And they say that as a defense. One time? That's not enough. You say something once in a speech and that's it? You check the little box? No, you got to repeat it over and over and over. You think everybody in the country heard that one time it was said in a speech? No. You think it's sunk in even if they did hear it? No. They have to hear something over and over and over for it to register. I think this is the mistake that was made throughout the Biden presidency. They just assumed that the American people would figure these things out on their own. I think Biden's theory was if he just does a good job, is a contrast to Donald Trump, doesn't do all the crazy stuff that Donald Trump did, and just does a good job, that the American people would figure out that he's doing a good job and reward him for it. What do you think about that theory now? It's an utter failure. It's a ridiculous theory. When you're not talking and only the other side is talking and they're constantly lying and running down the economy and everything else, but that's the only thing that the American people hear because Biden doesn't say anything, because he thinks the American people are just going to figure it out on their own. So the only thing they hear day after day after day is how horrible the country is, how horrible crime is, how horrible the economy is, how horrible immigration is, how horrible everything is. That's what they heard every day for 4 years. When only one side is talking, it doesn't matter what they're saying. There's nothing else. There's no competing ideas. There's nothing on the other side. If all people are hearing is that one thing, people are going to believe that one thing. And that's what's happened over the last 4 years. So people believe that the strongest economy in the world is the worst economy in the world. And they believe, stupidly, because they're a bunch of ignoramuses, that the president controls the price of groceries at their local store, controls the price of gas, controls the price of, I guess, everything. So that's what you get when you don't use the bully pulpit, when you don't constantly try to inform the American people about what's going on, explain to them about what's going on. And another problem with respect to the economy is, to the extent Joe Biden talked about it at all, he would kind of almost just say, well, the economy's good, you should think it's good too because it's good. That's not convincing to people who are, struggling to get by because things are expensive. You need to constantly be telling them, I recognize prices are too expensive. I understand the problem. I'm working on it. Here's what I'm doing, over and over and over, so that the people can see that you're doing something about it, that you recognize the problem, you feel their pain, and you're actively working on it. They didn't get any of that. So they believed the bullshit lies of Donald Trump that he could come in and, I guess, wave a magic wand and reduce the price of everything at the store. Even though he's promising to do the exact opposite with his tariffs on everything. So you have Biden from the jump making the border less secure and giving Donald Trump an issue to run on. You have the fact that he did little to nothing to use the power of his office to communicate to the American people what's going on in this country and the steps that he's taking to improve this country. So they're left to just, the void is filled by MAGA and all their propaganda and their lies. I don't mean to be beating up on Biden, but I'm calling it as I see it. Again, I think he's been a good president, but just doing the job isn't enough. Here's another problem. This is when I said that the election was lost 2 years ago. Here's what I'm talking about. Joe Biden should never have run for re-election. I know some people will invariably say, because they've told me this before, and we're just going to have to disagree on this, that Joe Biden would have won. if he stayed in the race. I don't think, I think that's absurd. I think he would have lost just as big or not bigger than Kamala Harris did. He should never have run again. They spent most of his presidency, one of the reasons why he wasn't out there talking, because I don't think he was really capable of doing it in an effective way. And I think they were hiding how old and frail he has become. We didn't really get to see that. Everything was very carefully controlled, all his public appearances. We didn't really get to see that until that debate, and we were shocked with what we saw. So much so that the Democrat Party did everything they could to get him out of the race. We never should have been in that position. He should have put the country ahead of his own personal ambition 2 years ago and decided not to run. What would have happened then? There would have been an open primary. We didn't have a primary, an open primary. We had, a sort of primary with a sitting president. That's never much of a contest. And then it was too late. I mean, we could have had some sort of mini primary, I guess, or something once he dropped out. We didn't do that. So we just installed Kamala Harris, and honestly, Joe Biden set her up to fail. Because Joe Biden was, unjustifiably in my opinion, but Joe Biden was and is very unpopular. The American people have come to believe that the economy is terrible, and they blame Joe Biden for it. Fair or not, and it's largely unfair, that's the way it is. And so the last person we probably should have nominated was his vice president. Right? And this is not a knock on Kamala Harris. It's not her fault. And as I say, she did a great job as a candidate. But if a sitting president is horribly unpopular, as Joe Biden is, it's not a good idea to nominate his vice president, because they are saddled with all of his baggage. It would have been much better had Joe Biden dropped out. They could have had an open primary. If Kamala Harris won, then Kamala Harris won. But I don't think Kamala Harris would have won in an open primary. I think you probably would have gotten someone like a Gavin Newsom or somebody. I think we would have gotten somebody else. Somebody who is not attached at the hip to Joe Biden, who is horribly unpopular. So she was hamstrung by the fact that she served as vice president to a horribly unpopular president. That is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, and she wasn't able to do it, to overcome. That's why I say, to a large degree, this election was over 2 years ago when Joe Biden decided to run again. A couple more things. This is I don't want to nitpick the campaign too much because, as I say, I think she did a great job. But one thing that really bothered me, and I've talked about this, is the fact that they didn't use much of the ammunition we had to use in terms of his crimes and all of his bad acts. That largely went unused against him in this campaign. And every time I've brought this up, I get people saying to me, oh, well, Mark, everybody knows about that. Everybody knows about his crimes. Everybody knows about him being found liable for sexual abuse. To that, I say, bullshit. I don't believe that for a half a freaking second. I guarantee you, most of the American people know precious little about any of it. But again, we just assume that the American people are well informed and that they know about all of this stuff. They don't. They might know that he's been charged with crimes, but what have they heard about him? Since nobody talked about him, Biden didn't want to talk about it for obvious reasons. He was head of the executive branch, which was prosecuting him. So it was, it was right that Biden didn't say anything. The Attorney General's not going to say anything. It's right for him not to say anything, but I'll deal with Merrick Garland in a minute. But as candidate, the Harris campaign didn't do anything with it. The Democrats didn't do much with it at all. Just assumed everybody knows about it, so we don't need to talk about it. I promise you, if I had to guess, the vast majority of the American people have no idea that Donald Trump was found liable for sexually abusing a woman that the judge called rape. I guarantee you most people don't know that. And to the extent they know that he has been charged with crimes, all they've heard about it is the Trump propaganda about it. Because like I say, Democrats didn't talk about it much, so all they hear is the Fox News spin. Oh, it's just a witch hunt. He didn't do anything wrong. Oh, that case was dismissed. So they figure, oh, there must have been nothing to it. It was all political. You think the average American could explain to you what he was charged with? Or the facts of any of these cases? Pfft, give me a break. They don't know anything about these cases. And we didn't tell them. We didn't make it part of the campaign. We just had sort of like references to it. Cryptic references to it that she used when she first came into the race. She would say something like, she had this line where, I was a district attorney. I was an attorney general. I prosecuted criminals and thugs. I know Donald Trump's type. Remember that line? That's about as close as she got, for the most part, of ever talking about his crimes. That's not good enough. There's been no politician in American history that I can freaking imagine who has had as much political ammunition to use against him as Donald Trump did, and we used almost none of it. The man raped a woman, and it was hardly ever mentioned. It was never even brought up. He stole classified documents, kept them in his toilet, had foreigners in his unsecured friggin' golf club, could have gone in and out of that. It wasn't even raised as a question how Donald Trump might have endangered national security. Nothing. We didn't talk about it. Don't talk about any of his crimes. Oh, the American people know about it. We don't need to bring it up. That's a huge mistake, in my opinion. Maybe you disagree. And if you do, maybe you convince me I'm wrong. So leave a comment. But I think it was a huge mistake. Now on to Merrick Garland. The worst attorney general in all of American history. A coward of epic proportion. And again, this also goes back to Joe Biden. Who nominated this man? Joe Biden nominated him. Why? As a consolation prize for not getting onto the Supreme Court. That sound like a good qualification for Attorney General? Especially given the times in which we found ourselves in 2020 or 2021 when Joe Biden took office. We had just had a former president of the United States incite a violent insurrection to overthrow the government. Thousands of his supporters stormed the Capitol, beat police officers, and on and on and on. Never was the selection of an attorney general more important than in 2021. Never was it more important to have a tough as nails bulldog prosecutor as attorney general. And who did Joe Biden pick? A freaking wallflower. That's who Joe Biden picked. If Joe Biden had picked a good attorney general, one who would have begun an investigation of Donald Trump on day one, or appointed Jack Smith or another special prosecutor on day one, we would have been 2 years further along in the criminal process, and Donald Trump would already be in prison. He wouldn't even have been a candidate. He would be in a prison cell right now, even with the Supreme Court having gotten involved. We would have been 2 years further along. The Supreme Court just decided their case this past summer. Well, if we had started this 2 years ago, that would have happened 2 summers ago, in 2022. And we would have had the last 2 years to get him tried and convicted and sent to prison. But instead, Merrick Garland did nothing until the January 6th Commission, the committee in Congress, had their public hearings and sort of forced his hand. And then he appointed Jack Smith 2 years in. Merrick Garland is one of the reasons for this. Of course, Mitch McConnell and the cowardly Republicans who could have just voted to convict him, and he could never have run again. But Merrick Garland is an absolute colossal failure, and Joe Biden appointed him. And Joe Biden could have fired him at any time for his lack of urgency in investigating this stuff. And don't give me, presidents have to be hands off the Department of Justice. That's, constitutionally speaking, garbage. Neither the Department of Justice or any other executive branch agency is an independent agency. That's not a thing in our Constitution. A president, if they wanted to, could get right in, could handle individual cases if they wanted to. Now that's highly inappropriate, but they could. Constitutionally speaking, they could do that. But certainly, Joe Biden could have demanded, look, I want this investigated. And if you determine that there's crimes, you need to pursue those. I'm not going to tell you what crimes, what people to charge or what charges to bring or anything like that. But this was an attack on our democracy, and I want it thoroughly investigated. And I want a report on my desk as to what exactly happened and what charges, if any, you're bringing, and I want it on my desk in the next 6 months. Joe Biden could have done that. And that would have been hands off. He wouldn't have been involved in the investigation. He wouldn't be making prosecutorial decisions. He would just be instructing his attorney general that this was an attack on our republic and I want it investigated. There's nothing wrong with him doing that. And there's no indication that Joe Biden did that. Merrick Garland, it was clear from the start this man was not up to the task. So he and Joe Biden both, in that regard, let us down, let Donald Trump get away with his crimes, because now that's what's happened now. He has now completely gotten away with all of his crimes. There will be no justice for Donald Trump in this life. Or at least it would appear at this point in time, and I don't see how it would happen. There's one final group I would like to lay blame at the feet of for what happened yesterday. And I'm sure I'm going to think about more, and I think it's important that we discuss it. We can't just give up. I mean, we could just give up. I'm not going to just give up. The future of this country is too important. I'm going to go down fighting, and maybe we lose, and it's just got a hell of a lot harder yesterday. Like I said, there was an easy solution to this. We could have beat them yesterday. Now it's just got a hell of a lot harder. But the fight's not over, and I'm going to continue fighting it. And that means we've got to be honest about the position we're in and how the hell we got here. So these are some of the things that I see that put us in this position. And again, if you disagree, that's fine. I'd love to hear what your disagreement is. But I will repeat, if you can't disagree civilly, if you're going to be mad at me because I said something that offends your sensibilities, maybe you're reflexively defensive of Joe Biden. And again, I thought he was a good president in a lot of ways. But in some of these big ways, he let us down. It's just the fact. If you want to reflexively defend him and get angry at me for saying it, that's fine. Now finally, and by the way, we're going to talk about this a lot too. If you think Donald Trump is leaving in 4 years, you're nuts. Donald Trump is never leaving office until he chooses to, or he expires in office, or he hands it over to his son or a hand-picked successor without an election, and he sets up the first Trump dynasty in America, and he decides he just wants to go play golf. He'll be, the emperor emeritus or whatever. He's not leaving. And this, I promise you, there will be calls very soon. You'll start hearing this, I promise you. In the not too distant future, Republicans will start talking about how do we keep Donald Trump in office after the 4 years? Should he be allowed to run again? Should we, just ignore that part of the Constitution that prevents him from running again, and he should just run anyway? Should he just cancel the election? Because after all, he was entitled to 8 years uninterrupted because the last election was stolen from him. And so he's entitled, he should have had 8 years uninterrupted. So now he gets to start from a clean slate. This is the first 4 years, and he gets at least another 4 years after this because he was robbed in 2020. I don't know what they'll say, but I promise you they'll start laying the groundwork for how Donald Trump stays in office. And we'll talk about that more. Finally, the media. This freaking media. The media who refused to cover Donald Trump the way he should have been covered. They sane-washed him at every turn, no matter what he said, what crazy things he said or did. They either didn't cover it at all or just sane-washed it. Instead of telling us the batshit crazy thing he actually said, they paraphrased what they think he was trying to say, so he doesn't sound crazy. Largely, they mostly ignored the crazy things he did. And they do a lot of this, both sides crap. But over and over and over, the media has protected Donald Trump, refused to report accurately on Donald Trump, refused to report on the real danger that Donald Trump posed. And here we are. And the media is going to be one of the first groups of people that Donald Trump, fascist dictator now, with a Supreme Court telling him that he has near complete immunity to commit whatever crimes he wants, the media is going to be one of his first targets. These people are so stupid, it's unbelievable. Why did they do this? Why did they cover for him? Maybe partly out of fear. But I think it's because Donald Trump is good for business. And if you've paid attention to the media as a business, it's struggling mightily. Papers are going out of business. Staffs are being cut. They're losing tons of money. Social media is killing them. And Donald Trump is good for ratings and puts money in their pockets. And I think that's largely why. They wanted him to win. They might not personally have wanted him to be president, but they wanted him to win for business. Because the crazy brings views and clicks and money. And that's what they're about. So they sold us out for website clicks. So those are some of the reasons why I think yesterday happened. Ultimately, it's the fault of the American people. Everything that there is to know about Donald Trump, they should have known about. A lot of them didn't. A lot of them did and didn't care. A lot of them do know that he's a criminal. They don't care. They don't care that he raped a woman. They think it's great he got away with it. Why? Because it makes the libs angry. It's all about owning the libs. But I think structurally this race was over 2 years ago. Because Joe Biden allowed himself to become very unpopular for lack of communication with the American people, lack of education of the American people about the state of the economy and what things he was doing and all of that. The void was filled by Donald Trump and Fox News and the right-wing media echo chamber, which did nothing but tell lies for 4 years. So Joe Biden, largely allowed them to define his presidency, send his approval ratings into the toilet, and then he, in my opinion, selfishly decided to run for re-election again. Instead of giving Democrats an opportunity to have a serious primary, instead he waits until just a few months ago, drops out, and leaving it too little time to actually have a contested primary. We put Kamala Harris in there, who, again, did a great job but she was set up for failure from the beginning because she was his vice president and he is horribly popular, and she got stuck with all of his baggage. And most of that baggage, most of what people think about Joe Biden and his presidency is completely unwarranted. You know, thinking the economy is horrible. It's not horrible. But so a lot of the disapproval of Joe Biden, in my opinion, is not warranted. It's not fair. But it is what it is. And he's horribly unpopular. And dropping out at the last minute and just plugging Kamala Harris in there saddled her with his unpopularity. People think that it was Joe Biden's policies that led to the horrible economy, which isn't even horrible, and that Kamala Harris is connected to those policies. She's just as responsible for them as Joe Biden. It's the Biden-Harris administration. So she was screwed from the get-go. I didn't think the American people were quite as corrupted by tribal partisanship and rank stupidity as they are. I knew we were close to the tipping point. I didn't know we passed it. And we apparently passed it a long way back because this election wasn't even close. But here we are. And these are some of the reasons I think we are where we are. That's what I think. Maybe you disagree. And if you do, let me know how you disagree. And that's it for now. I'm going to have a lot more to talk about, but dark days for America. There's no way to sugarcoat this. This is just awful. We're in a real bad spot. Anyway, I thank you for watching. I hope you subscribe and turn on notifications, leave comments, and I'll talk to you again soon.